All right, friendos, once again, get out your tinfoil hats because it's time to react to your wrestling conspiracy theories. I bet you figured out by the lighting of the room here. Also, it's in the title of the video, so I'm sure when you clicked on the video, you understood what you were getting. Anyways, let's go ahead and start off with this one. JT House says the Khan family doesn't own 100% of AEW. Ooh, spicy stuff. So this one is often speculated on, and it largely stems from the Kevin Kelly lawsuit thing that went down not that long ago. I think it was like a year or two ago, whatever it was. Anyways, as part of that, back in 2024, so just over a year ago, AEW had to file a, what is this called? A corporate disclosure statement. This is a requirement under the court of law in Pennsylvania, I guess is where this thing was filed. In any event, according to this corporate disclosure statement, it says here that Beatnik Investments LLC, which is just the parent company of AEW, no publicly held corporation owns 10% or more of its stock, which is like very specific. Because why would they put this in unless a publicly held corporation did in fact own less than 10% of its stock? In the past, back in 2023 on a media call in September, what pay-per-view would that have been? I forget. All in, all out, maybe all out. I don't know. Tony Khan was asked whether WBD owned a stake in AEW as maybe part of the TV deal. Tony Khan says, as for WBD and their stake in the business, that is something that would be between us. But I would also be open to that, to Warner Brothers having a piece or a bigger piece potentially. So if somebody asked him, hey, Tony, does Steve from WrestleJuice and Going in Raw own a piece of AEW? He would surely say, no, you're being ridiculous. So it seems like it's probably pretty likely that WBD owns some amount of AEW. You could draw that conclusion, perhaps. Of course, the more sexy answer would be like, oh, maybe Cody Rhodes owns a piece of AEW, and that's why they were trying to keep that info from getting out, because I think they were trying to fight the public release of that information. But I don't have that info in front of me, so I can't guarantee that's the case. In any event, Tony Khan's like, oh, WBD? Yeah, I don't know. It'd be kind of cool if they did, though, wouldn't it? Or a bigger piece than they already do, which would indicate that there is a piece there that WBD owns. Anyways, so yeah, I think it's entirely likely that Shad Khan does not own 100%, or the Khan family does not own 100% of AEW. That is probably the case. Let's move on to the next one here. Tony the Pokemon guy says ECW is not only destined to fail, it was purposely sabotaged from the inside. I think it was always destined to fail, and I don't think it had anything to do with sabotage from the inside. Paul Heyman has stated in the past, I think it was probably, and take whatever he says with a grain of salt, obviously, but that, the pay-per-view companies owed him like millions of dollars. He had a hard time paying his wrestlers because of all that. I think that the problem is, man, the real magic of ECW, that was not going to work on a larger stage. I just don't think it would. I think Paul Heyman, as a creative mind, ended up working on a bigger stage. His time in WWE across several different decades, I think worked out pretty good. But ECW, I've always maintained that ECW's deal, the reason why they were so popular, and you could see this in the invasion angle they did, or the territory versus territory angle they ran. I think it was with USWA. I want to say it was. And it was like ECW people would show up there, and or it was Memphis. I thought it was USWA. I don't know what it was. They would show up there, and you would see just how outdated the other territories looked. And then you'd see what ECW looked like, and it was like, holy shit, this is a presentation right here. It feels like it's a product out of the 1990s and not one that's stuck in the 1980s. But pretty quickly after that, WWF, I mean, let's be honest, WWF's attitude thing, their rebranding, it was just a heavy dose of ECW. They just were like, oh man, yeah, that presentation's really good. Let's just go ahead and kind of do that. Let's actually leap out of the 1980s, because 1994-95 WWF was still so firmly trying to be what was popular in the 80s. And culture had moved on. Popular culture, fashion, music, et cetera, had simply moved on, and they didn't move on with it. ECW made that leap. They understood that, hey, we need to be whatever. I think Heyman has said this before, and I hate using it because it's kind of cheesy, but we need to be the grunge version of wrestling. Well, it wasn't long after that WWF was like, oh, yeah, we're going to do that then. That's cool. Our logo, we're going to turn it from this like metallic, pristine thing that just leaps out to you from the 80s. And we're just going to make it a bunch of scratches, you know, like the last marks of a serial killer's victim. So, yeah, I think ECW, and what else did ECW have? You know, their luchadors. Well, WCW stole them. They didn't have that. They had good storytelling. They had some good storytelling. But, you know, what can you do when you don't have your wrestlers? Because they all moved on to other places, too. A lot of them did anyways. Then you just have like Rhino and Tommy Dreamer hanging around. So, yeah, I don't think ECW ever could have gone and done what they did really well to a bigger national audience. Sabotage from the inside? I want more details, though. That's what I want. I want you to spill some dirt here, Tony, the Pokemon guy. But not before we get Coach John Pliskin, who says Raven never got pushed in WWE because he got Shane McMahon in trouble with the law. So I watched a relatively recent shoot interview with Raven. And yeah, he actually confirmed in that he used to hang out with Shane McMahon quite a bit. And yeah, he seemingly used to kind of get Shane into trouble. But then he also said that he had like some sort of NDA or something, or he legally could not talk about a lot of the WWE stuff that the host of this particular shoot interview wanted to talk about, which at that point I'd be like, why are you here then? Because people like dirt, man. I mean, Raven, from all accounts that I've read about Raven, an extremely smart guy, one of the smartest guys in wrestling, but also a very creative person and a person who really wants to do his thing, who wants to use his ideas. And I don't know how far that can go in a company like WWE at the time. But then what do I know? I'm not there. I find it more easy to believe that Raven wasn't given a big push in WWF because there's like a bunch of other reasons that make more sense. One of which simply is like, Vince didn't know what to do with him. You know, what do you want to do, pal? You know, and he just didn't know what to do with him. I think that's way more likely because why would he have been hired there in the first place? Just to stick it to WCW and then put him on ice? Maybe. I don't know. But I kind of feel like the Shane McMahon thing, I don't think that was that big of a deal because he hired him back. And then there was one rumor that said like Vince happened to see Raven on his programming and was like, who hired Johnny Polo back? Because Johnny Polo and Vince had done commentary together before. So I feel like all that was sort of in the past and they just didn't find anything for Raven to do. But I don't know. Let's see here. Chester Lerman says the theory that ECW heavy episode today. The theory that ECW is being used as a WWF developmental. That's not a theory. It's like true. Vince was funding ECW. I think everybody's been really out in the open about that one. So, I mean, I think less is developmental and more is like, you know, hey, here's some talent. You bring some talent over here. I'll help you. I'll help you stick around. I think kind of informal developmental, probably. Yeah. I mean, that kind of makes sense. So Stuzo says Vince is, oh, wow, this is a big one. Stuzo says Vince is back booking WWE through his proxies without TKO knowing. Bruce, Pritchard, Road Dogg, etc. Triple H is too distracted with White House stuff. Vince is secretly booking. But so like for this to be true, Triple H would have to just sort of be ceding his creative role to these other names wholesale. Like, yeah, whatever you guys want to do is great. And Vince would be controlling them somehow. But what leverage does Vince have over those guys to be controlling them in such a manner? And what would happen when they run some shit by Triple H and he'd be like, see, here's the thing. I don't think it was necessarily that Vince liked, I think Vince enjoyed doing the creative, but I think Vince liked being there in the hustle and bustle of wrestling. I kind of feel like him just being on the phone with Bruce Pritchard or texting Pritchard or whatever and being like, hey, you should do this now. I feel like that probably wouldn't scratch the itch that Vince McMahon would have for what he used to do. Plus, if he's not getting paid for it, what does he care? He probably doesn't even watch that shit anymore. That's my conspiracy theory. Vince doesn't watch WWE anymore. Pizza Core says, I have a theory that Triple H has been a lead creative guy since 2013, since the Daniel Bryan storyline. Initially, it was a test from Vince to see if H would be capable of running creative. If Vince were ever stepped down because that story went down so well with the crowd, Vince let Triple H run creative in NXT as a reward, and a second test to see if he run a whole promotion. Also, between 2014 and 2019, you see a whole bunch of NXT Triple H created guys dominating. But now that Vince actually stepped back down in 2023, Triple H is just tired of doing creative. Probably. Okay, so I'm just going to say this. You could have dispensed with the whole first paragraph here, because this could have just been Triple H is just tired of doing creative, probably because he used up all his best ideas in NXT during the 5 or so years he ran the promotion. That actually does seem kind of logical. I don't know about the first part. I mean, I think, dude, Triple H has been a creative guy since I think 2004, 5, something. I know he's talked openly about attending the creative meetings. I know Bruce Pritchard has talked about that as well. I think around 2005, he started getting involved in, the creative aspect of things, not necessarily running things, but being definitely involved. I mean, his fingerprints are all over everything. So you could tell the guy was like, he had a massive, they call it the Reign of Terror. That wouldn't have happened without him being in charge of a lot of shit, even in an informal capacity. But the idea that Triple H has used up all his ideas already, maybe. I just think Triple H is old school. I think main roster is kind of being run like NXT back then, because NXT was very simple back then. It's just you had a really, really cool presentation. You had really, really cool wrestlers who knew how to wrestle really, really well. It was stripped down, so it felt really underground. And they had an hour a week. They had an hour a week to do their shit. So, yeah, and I think there's probably a little bit of, I get to have my own sandbox. I can play with my toys. And now he's on a bigger stage, and he's got like Nick Khan overseeing him and Ari Emanuel like looking over his shoulder. So it's just not going to be as cool as NXT was. I like the idea that he ran out of ideas, though. Next up, Torian of Universe 6 says that rumor that Hogan only wanted Warrior in WCW in 1998 to get his win back over him. So what the fuck happened there? What? Whoa. That was weird. So here's my guess on that one. There's one thing that drove Hulk Hogan. I think Hulk Hogan's main motivation for wanting to be the champion was simple. It made him money. Like he always knew the guy with the belt, generally speaking. And on top of that, like when you look back at the tours in WWF back in like when Hogan was a big deal in WWF, all of his tours made a shit ton of money. So he made a lot of money. And I think this is hard to let go. That was only 13 years later. You don't want to admit, oh man. But then he joined the NWO. NWO was hot. So of course Hogan was hot. So I don't think I honestly don't really think that Hogan cared too much about the actual theatrics of, I lost. If somebody said, hey, Hulk Hogan, I will give you double the money that you're making in your 1998 contract, but you're going to lose to everybody. I think he'd probably take it. I think the guy just wanted to make money. And I think he thought that him being in control of his creative, I think he thought that him being on the top with the title would facilitate that more and was best for everything, mainly him. But, it was a big deal match back in 1990. It was a big deal match. I think the guy just understood, hey, I know if I do this big deal match, yeah, of course I'm going to win because I'm Hulk Hogan. But, there's a lot of money to be made there. I think that's what he cared. I think he just cared about making money. And I think he thought that going heavy on him would be the way to go. And I'll be honest with you. I think by the time Warrior came in, I think most people probably just wanted to see Hogan win anyways. I know I did. Trophy Hunter says there was one I heard growing up that WWE sent Bret Hart to WCW to kill it. All right, so we've heard that WWE sent Vince Russo there to kill it. But I've never heard that Bret got sent there to kill it. So, I guess it's possible. But I feel like Bret did, and if that was the case, he did such a good performance acting like he really hated being there Because if you're being sent to do something, aren't you going to like play a certain role? He really seemed like he didn't want to be there at first. He had some good matches there, though. He had some decent promos, too, but boy, oh boy, they really dropped the ball with him. Anyways, hey, listen, that's going to do it for this edition of Wrestling Conspiracy Theories. I might have to put up a new thread for the next one, so be sure to hit that subscribe button and the notify bell. And then I think there's some like new thing on YouTube where you're supposed to hype videos up now. I don't know what that entails. I have no idea what that means, but if you guys can figure that out, go ahead and do it. I probably should know because I'm on YouTube. Or am I? Yeah, I am. I'm on YouTube.